breakfast.
First appearing in the pages of American Comics Group's Forbidden Worlds number 73, Herbie Popnecker was the creation of writer Richard E. Hughes, using the pseudonym Shane O'Shea and artist Ogden Whitney. Unlike other comic heroes of the time, Herbie wasn't a strapping alpha type in cape and spandex, but instead a short, overweight kid, seemingly more interested in napping than seizing the day. However, readers soon discovered there was more to Herbie than met the eye. While living an outwardly normal life with parents Mom and Dad, Herbie was often swept up in the most outrageous of adventures, a task he was well equipped for. In spite of his benign appearance, Herbie was in possession of a startling array of powers, some granted to him by his vast collection of lollipops, including hypnosis, the ability to walk on air, and invulnerability, as well as other curious talents like time travel, the gift of speaking with animals, and pre-established relationships with some of the most powerful and influential people to ever walk the earth. Today we take a look at 5 fantastic Herbie tales, beginning with his origin in the pages of Forbidden World 73 from December of 1958. Herbie's quiet Saturday afternoon begins at a PTA meeting where this fella and his glass of water talk about character. Did you know that most grown-ups started off as kids? It's important for the youth of today to engage. And here's a sterling example of today's youth engaged in his breakfast. Disdainfully, Dad Pincius Popper laments the fact that his son Herbie is such a one-note symphony. Why can't the kid be more like Dad was as a boy in the halcyon days of his sun-dappled youth? Why is Herbie such a big nothing? With that, the elder Popnecker chases the lad out of the house with the decree that he do something. Armed with his ubiquitous lollipop, Herbie heads into the world to hoots of derision from his fellow youths. He ends up at the zoo where he asks Pinky the lion what's got him so hot and bothered. Pinky explains it's the zookeeper and his broom, then promptly makes a break for it via the broken lock on his cage. Grabbing the errant feline by his tail, Herbie redeposits the now chastened wild thing back in its cage before ambling on. Meanwhile, presumably over at Marvel Comics, the Daily Bugle reports U.S. Senator Stevens is lost at sea. Only he's not lost at all, as Herbie struggles to point out. Blown off by unhearing adults, our portly protagonist heads down to the pier before getting airborne in his own inimitable fashion. Cut to a search party about to give up when their attention is caught by this explosive display. Drawn to the site of the pyrotechnic activity, the pair discover the missing senator, who explains it was Herbie's quick thinking that saved him. Elsewhere, our now bored hero cuts across a farmer's pasture just in time to encounter this unlikely sight. This is Chontuk and Gooble, an exploratory arm of an alien invasion force. Confused at Herbie's ability to see them, he's hustled on board their ship where the would-be invaders explain their plan before attempting to do away with this troublesome Terran. However, Herbie takes an attack on his second-to-last lollipop personal and blasts the aliens with their own ray, disintegrating the entire ship and saving the planet in the process. With that, our hefty hero returns home in time for dinner, his parents none the wiser for his adventures. It's a solid introduction, if a little dry. Over the course of Herbie's next several appearances, Hughes and Whitney's vision would begin to gel, their ideas growing wilder and their storytelling becoming more fluid and dynamic. By the time Herbie number 1 hit the stands in May of 1964, the creators had cracked the code, producing tales unlike anything else on the newsstand. Herbie and the Dragon's Tears finds our boy enjoying the finer things in life. Dad, of course, takes issue with his son sitting indulging in lollipops. When Mom protests it isn't as bad as all that, she's quickly rebuked, Dad revealing the depths of his son's obsession. But if Dad were to look, he'd notice Herbie is abruptly vanished, summoned to the White House by no less than the President himself. Seems the junior Popnecker's diplomatic skills are needed to calm things down with Russia. Boy, the more things change, huh? Herbie heads to Moscow with the aim of talking Russia into pulling their efforts with the U.S. so that the countries might reach space together. Upon settling down on Soviet soil, the lad assumes a more fitting guise before meeting with Prime Minister Khrushchev. After flawless execution of the Ukrainian Hopak, the big K sits Herbie down and explains why his country will never team with the U.S. Seems they've unearthed a mysterious rocket fuel devised by no less than Leonardo da Vinci. The sticky wicket here is that the fuel is derived from dragon's tears, and, sadly, dragons no longer exist. With the Soviets on the verge of synthesizing a chemical version of the tears, Herbie returns home with the bad news. But while our representatives are helpless, our hero has come up with a plan. Using one of his special time lollipops, Herbie plunges into the past, saying hello to some familiar faces in the process. Elsewhere in medieval England, Merlin entertains King Arthur with an astonishing display of his mystical powers. Before the egotistical wizard can take a bow, he's knocked down a few pegs by the arriving Herbie. A magic contest is quickly proposed, and the two powerhouses go head-to-head. Merlin's attempts to turn Herbie into a pig prove redundant, while the qualities of our hero's lollipop are unexpectedly transformative. It even trumps this legendary crowd-pleaser. Wait, how does his hat stay on? Terrified at this powerful warlock, Arthur asks how he might be rid of Herbie, who eloquently explains his need of dragon's tears. Dispatched to the woods where the beast was last seen, Herbie discovers a now enamored Lady Guinevere has followed. Before she can make a love connection, the aforementioned dragon appears, but the herbivore is prepared. Giving the beast a bop with his lollipop, the dragon reels from the assault. Guinevere is suitably impressed with this and rewards Herbie with a kiss. Unfortunately, the jealous Sir Lancelot has witnessed this exchange and challenges Herbie to a duel. Never one to back down, the lad saddles up, but the subtleties of the sport elude him. For all that, he manages to hold his own against his skilled opponent until abruptly dispatching him in this hilarious fashion. With that out of the way, Herbie returns to his own time, dragon in tow. Using admirably humane means, our hero procures the needed dragon tears to create the fuel that leads to NASA discovering this place. Another win for Manifest Destiny. Next up, make way for the Fat Fury. So who is this corpulent crusader? Couldn't be Herbie. He's asleep, or was, until this sinister silhouette stole his hammock. It's the work of Mr. Horrible, a new breed of criminal with his own way of doing things. Seems he's on a spree, stealing anything not nailed down. Even motorists aren't immune to his thieving ways. As the narrator says, important people everywhere had suggestions, but it'll take a true man of action to fix this situation. But where to find one? Inspired by his funny books, Herbie decides to become a costume hero and meet the challenge. And tigers for breakfast? Looks like we're in good company. Following this helpful billboard, Herbie enrolls in a course at the American Hero School. We'll skip over the more nuanced stuff like laws and morality and ski straight to flying. Hey, comics are a visual medium after all. And while Herbie is great at walking on air, flight is something he doesn't quite take naturally to. His super strength game also isn't where it might be. So how about combat skills? Well, let's just say that the champ has nothing to worry about. Flunking out of hero school, Herbie departs undaunted. He even attends the award ceremony, but there's little time for self-recrimination. Mr. Horrible strikes again, taking out all of the new heroic graduates in one swell swoop. It's clear that something must be done. Delving deep into a trunk of leftover masquerade costumes, the plus-size powerhouse tries several compelling options before settling on something inarguably Herbie. A few finishing touches later, and a new hero rises to meet the challenge. Just in time, too, as Mr. Horrible is attempting to kidnap no less than the Statue of Liberty. The Fat Fury leaps from his bedroom window, and, after a brief pause for station identification, our boy is up and at them. We're treated to a nice little Madhouse-style gag to keep the momentum going during the flight, but we arrive at our destination quickly enough. After a better-than-average landing, the Fury notes Horrible is already on the scene. He attempts to dissuade the villain of his sinister machinations, but Horrible just kind of smacks him around. It's almost as if he doesn't realize whose comic he's in, a fact that our hero points out. It's this sort of storytelling that decades later someone would rebrand as meta and make a buttload of cash from. Back then, this was just the sort of thing you expected for your 12 cents. Unthwarted by Horrible's violent nature, the Fury perseveres, fighting on in spite of the odds. Drawing a fresh lollipop, he plusses up, borrowing the Statue of Liberty's torch to dispatch his brawny foe. When that doesn't work, it's fisticuffs, with the Fury landing a series of dazzling blows that lead to this stunning knockout. Horrible dispatched, our hero returns Liberty's torch, then heads home just in time for dinner. The crisis averted, the curtain closes on a now familiar scene. Professor Flipdome Screwy Machine sees Dad feeling under the weather. And he's a lousy patient, too, with Herbie conscripted to cheer him. It's a pointless task, as all Dad wants to do is grouse. A television show sets him off, and, in the end, we're not all that sad to see him go back to work, still ill or not. The bus driver is certainly happy to see him, although that has less to do with his pride at being a transit worker and more to do with being Professor Flipdome, the scientist from next door who can't find volunteers for his wacky experiments. At least, he couldn't until he started driving this bus. Luckily, Herbie has been pursuing said bus. Dad's forgotten rubbers in tow. Reckon he knows something we don't. Catching up, Herbie finds himself falling victim to the same fate as his father, plunged into the microscopic kingdom of Miniaturia. After a bit of back and forth with its less than accommodating denizens, Herbie heads off to find Dad, but the atmosphere is too thin to support him. He takes it upon himself to get an Apis upgrade and buzzes off to find Pops, who's discovered some trouble all on his own. Herbie zips in to rescue the elder Popnecker, but Dad doesn't see the save. Instead, he heads through the gates of the city, where he beholds a remarkable sight. It's Herbie, swinging a pachyderm by its trunk. Remembering what the professor said about this world having tiny doubles of everything on our world, Dad realizes this is Herbie's doppelganger. And so does Herbie, watching from a distance. Deciding this is his chance to prove his worth to his father, Herbie confers with Herbie. After a tense bit of detente, the two agree to a deal, and the double makes himself scarce. Thusly, Herbie comes to Dad's aid when this refugee from them makes his move. Herbie quickly subdues the oversized insect, which is just as well, as Dad is already into it with a swordfish. Herbie takes matters into his own hands, dispensing the sawtooth sea beast with extreme prejudice. His bacon once again saved, Dad thanks Herbie effusively before he's pushed back into the enlarging ray and returned to our world. Only there's a wrinkle as Dad arrives in an undersized state, and while the professor attempts to make good with another application of his curious ray, let's just say it's going to be a while before Dad is wearing his favorite slippers again. Now we head off to the Old West in a tale that could only be called Big Fat Mess at the OK Corral. Herbie is awoken by Mom, who urges the logy lad to indulge in a little physical activity. Our hero heads to the zoo, which is always good for a gag or two. For example, check out this green and yellow lion, no less deadly for its curious color scheme. Here he sets his sights on this distinguished gentleman breaking free to pursue his newly chosen prey. Luckily, Herbie is there to bop the king of the beasts with this here lollipop, which has the expected mollifying effect. We learn that the old codger is Mr. Merengue, proprietor of a weapons museum. He asks Herbie for his lollipop due to its remarkable offensive capabilities, placing it alongside Goliath's sling and William Tell's arrow, but the next day the lollipop is returned. Seems an eccentric millionaire was all set to buy said museum until he realized it lacked the legendary shotgun of Doc Holliday. Because he's a good egg, Herbie opts to help the proprietor, using one of his time lollipops to traverse the decades back to Old Westy times. He lands amongst some natives who quickly subdue this mysterious visitor. They debate the merits of various weapons to kill him with, in the end going with this Sears and Roebuck rifle. Our erstwhile antagonist catches the bullet in his teeth, which leads to an all-out shotgun assault on his portly person. Unfazed, the medicine man is brought in to work some mystical means, but these also fall far short of their target. After handling the charge of a full-grown bull, the natives summon their great spirit, who, it turns out, is on a first-name basis with Herbie. He's accepted into the tribe and taught to smoke him the peace pipe, whose meaning he clearly hasn't entirely absorbed in the following panels. Herbie heads out to Tombstone to retrieve Doc Holliday's rifle, but his outfit riles the populace. Time for an upgrade, courtesy of this dozing cowpoke. After a quick bit of tailoring, the kid is dudded up and he heads into the local saloon, where he orders a hamburger. And man, I'm with him. I'm starving. A member of the Clanton gang gives Herbie a pop on the noggin, but the youngster's natural resiliency drives the cowpoke off, with promises of returning with the whole Clanton gang. Sheriff Wyatt Earp gets wind of this and decides to deal with this mysterious stranger himself. In the noonday sun, the two face off. Slowly they sidle up to one another, Earp demanding Herbie draw. And hey, it's clear who's kept their sense of humor throughout this crisis anyway. Locked in the town jail, Herbie gathers his strength for the conflict ahead. Soon enough, the whole Clanton gang show up raising hell, and Herbie sees his cue. He knows Doc Holliday will be on the scene soon, and he needs that gun. He borrows this one in a great callback to a previous gag. Looking all over, our hero comes up empty on the Holliday front until realizing Doc is the town dentist. When it comes to fighting, the Doc is less John Wayne and more John Waters, which creates a bit of a pickle for our time traveler. He needs Holliday to be proactive so history might properly unfold, but the Doc seems more interested in his teeth. No mind, Herbie uses his uncanny abilities to compel the Doc into an aggressive state, getting him all geared up to take on the Clantons. Handing the dentist a loaded gun, Herbie sets Holliday loose on the gang. However, the Doc can't hit the broadside of a barn, and even worse, his hypnosis is already wearing off. Herbie decides to step up his game and loads the next round of shotgun shells with laughing gas. He rehypnotizes the Doc, then sends him back out to face the Clantons. This time, the gang is subdued, the gas knocking them unconscious. Wyatt Earp shows up just then to congratulate Holliday, who seems to be taking to this whole violence thing after all. A bop with a lollipop solves the problem, and with that, Herbie returns to the present day. The gun is given to Merengue, the museum is sold, and Herbie suddenly feels a bit winded. So what did he do to make himself so tired? I guess Mom will never know. We're going to wrap things up with just one more jaunt through time to check out George Washington's teeth. We look in on Dad entertaining this British person who brings up that whole George Washington biting the royal commissioner causing the Revolutionary War thing again. Herbie calls bullshit on that, which sees an affronted Dad take the key to the kid's lollipop closet. And that ain't good. Herbie needs a time pop to go back and prove things happen differently, but Dad's got the chest all locked up. Fortunately, Herbie is nothing if not tenacious, and he finds his way into the trunk. Unraveling a temporal sweetie, Herbie peels back the years, finally arriving in 1775. Using a modern for the time news conveyance, Herbie gets caught up on the headlines of the day. Seems General Washington is holding a conference with the British Commissioner with nothing less than a potential revolutionary war on the table. Unable to come to terms, Washington's false teeth leap from his head, biting the commissioner. And this, of course, means war. Understandably worried about having his pants licked off, old George pleads for help from Herbie, who'll do what he can. Later that night, Washington sends the signal that the British are in fact coming, but Paul Revere is stuck at home, waiting for his laundry. It's up to Herbie to rouse the colonists from their slumber, but they're less than receptive to this particular night ride. The Redcoats advance, with only our terse time traveler to stay the course. After the shot heard round the world rings out, it's looking international, leaving Washington in the lurch. Luckily, Herbie has a plan. Using a hot dog vending cart, Herbie pumps the Redcoats of Boston for info on upcoming military maneuvers. He gains valuable information on troop location and numbers by plying the Brits with junk food, then relays this information to General Washington via his avian associate. Washington is to cross the Delaware and attack the British forces on Christmas Eve. Understandably needing a nap after all of this, Herbie slumbers but is interrupted by Washington's teeth with bad news. Seems the general isn't doing so well and reinforcements are needed. But where to find them? Happily, America's farm animals offer to help out, and an unexpected attack comes in the wing. With Herbie chipping in for moral support, it's not long before the day is won, in no small part due to the assistance of the critters. Thanked for his efforts by old George, Herbie returns to his own time with the real story of just what happened that fateful day. Looks like there are some folks who just can't handle the truth. Herbie 23 ended where we began, reprinting the title character's first appearance from Forbidden number 73. It's an oddly circuitous route for such a title, bringing the gauge back to 1 before closing the curtain forever. Yes, there have been attempts to use the character again, but at best these come off as pale imitations of something too elusive to touch. The original Herbie stories were very much of their time and of their creators, and without them, the intangible magic that propelled these tales is absent. In our divisive and conflict-laden world, there simply isn't any breathing room for whimsy. Today's readers wouldn't know what to do with such a neutral and unpolarizing character other than condemn it for everything that it's not. Herbie is the hero we need but no longer deserve, an irreverent everyman with little regard for fools, ascending into the air, leaving the world to run itself into the ground. Pass me a lollipop, please. One of the rare cinnamon ones. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this program, please share. There are a lot of people talking about subjects like this, but there's only one, old guys who like old comics. I'm Jason Mink. Until the next time.